All right, so to get started, for the record, could you just tell me your full name and birth date, and then city, state you were born in?
Okay, so Randy Charles Smith. I was born October 5th, 1955 in Dayton, Ohio.
So which war did you serve in?
Vietnam War.
Vietnam.
Yeah.
What branch?
I was the United States Marine Corps.
Okay. When did you join?
I actually joined my senior year, March 22nd, 1973. It was on a delayed entry program, 180-day delay. And the last combat troops in Vietnam came home March 29th of 73. So at the time I said, well, I had missed the Vietnam War. And so I graduated in June 73. And I actually came to Sarasota. My uncle was working there for a couple of months. And then I went back north to Ohio and went active duty in September of 73. Went to boot camp.
So how long was boot camp for?
13 weeks. Started in late September and graduated December 22nd of 73.
So what was like that atmosphere like?
Well, Marine Corps boot camp is it's a strict indoctrination, which is a good word for brainwashing, where they break you down. You know, they physically very demanding physical training all day long with all kinds of Marine Corps history training and classroom training and hand-to-hand combat, and so everything's very strict, and attention to details paramount in everything you do, and by the time you leave there, you're in the best physical shape of your life, and mentally you're ready to do what's ever asked of you in battle and combat.
So what was your highest rank?
I made E5, which is sergeant, and it took me 2 years and 5 months to become a sergeant, and I just turned 20 years old.
What locations did you serve in?
After boot camp and advanced infantry training, I went to school in Washington, D.C., and then my first duty station was Saigon, Vietnam. Spent 12 months, 12 days there, and then the next duty station was Geneva, Switzerland. I was a Marine Embassy Guard, which Marine Embassy Guards serve throughout the world, and we protect American embassies and consulates throughout the world. So those were my two overseas stations, and then the last year in the Marine Corps I served at Camp Lejeune, Headquarters Company, Headquarters Battalion, 2nd Marine Division.
Do you feel as though you're prepared for what you're getting yourself into when you first joined?
Nowadays you have to be they make sure you're in physical shape, and you have to be able to pass certain physical tests before you even go to boot camp. Back then it was like I wrestled my senior year in high school, and I was done I think in February, late February, early March, and I wrestled 132. By the time I went in September, I hadn't done any physical training, any running, any working out, and I weighed 175, and I was a little flabby. And 13 weeks in boot camp, I came out at 145, and I could run like the wind, and so I was in great physical shape, and mentally I was definitely indoctrinated, and I'd do whatever they wanted me to do. So it definitely worked for me. But it's good to go in when you're young, because they prepare you to, attack an enemy position with machine guns and heavy artillery firing right at you, and you're supposed to just get up and run towards them and take them out, which when you get a little older, you say to yourself, that's probably not a good idea. So, but when you're young, you're gung-ho and prepared to do it.
What do you think that the toughest part of that boot camp process was?
That's a good question. Because I just, whatever they asked me to do, I did. And, the physical part, you just get better and better at it each day, each week you get better. And the mental challenge, the biggest challenge is not to be noticed. You don't want to be singled out, so you don't want to screw up, mess anything up. Otherwise, you get a drill instructor right in front of your face, you get one right in each ear, and I've seen them break kids or young men and just make them cry like babies, and thank goodness I never had that attention brought on to me. So the toughest part was probably first time away from home, and they really don't give you time to be homesick, even at night when all your duties are over and it's bedtime. You go to bed early, but didn't even have much time and think about things. Just went to sleep, and you got up. Dark 30. You get up really early. So the toughest part was probably being away from home.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember any of your instructors?
I do. Yeah. Just about all of them, actually. Gunnery Sergeant Stevens was the head drill instructor, and Staff Sergeant Wright, Staff Sergeant Stevens, did I say that one? And Sergeant Mahuji.
So how did you kind of cope getting through that adjustment time of being away from home?
They keep you busy, so it doesn't give you time to sit around and think about it. The more time, if you have idle time, downtime, then you have a tendency to think about the things that you miss, and not real crazy about the way you're treated, but they keep you so busy and active that you just do what they ask you to do the best of your ability, and try not to draw unwarranted attention to yourselves so that you don't get drill instructors screaming at you.
So when you were first deployed overseas, what was the feeling like of being away from the States, really, in Vietnam?
It was a huge cultural adjustment, because you come from suburbs, like going from Venice over to a third world country, Vietnam, and people make $1 a day, and plus the country had been through years of war, and my mother didn't want me to go, but it's kind of like, well, that's where they're sending me. I got to go wherever they're sending me. And the war was still going on between the North and the South, but there weren't any Americans involved when I got there. So, I didn't have to go out in the bush or out in the swamps and go on search and destroy missions or anything like that, because the war was over with American involvement, and I was an embassy guard, which is an elite program in the Marine Corps, and my duty was to guard the embassy and classified material and American personnel.
So did you see any combat while you were over?
Well, my ribbons, my awards that I received, I did receive a combat action ribbon for the during the evacuation. They were firing on us and shelling the city and bombing the airport, and that's where the last two Marines killed in Vietnam. They were friends of mine who were actually Marine security guards just like I was, and so I did receive a combat action ribbon, but it wasn't like I was out in the fierce battle like in the history of the Marine Corps, where we took the islands of Iwo Jima and Guadalcanal, and in Korea the Chosin Reservoir, and in Vietnam Quezon Valley. Those combat Marines hold my highest respect. And if I would have been older, I would have been there. But I got to Vietnam as soon as I could, and I was 18. And you can't be in a combat zone if you're under 18. So it's just, maybe it was luck of the draw that I was born later and didn't make the actual Vietnam War, although I do rate the Vietnam Service Medal with the Bronze Star, which is it's probably my most favorite award and ribbon that I have.
So, being in a different country, were you able to communicate much back to the States?
Actually, one of the buildings we guarded was a USAID building, and they had telephone operators there. And on Friday, when I worked on Fridays, I got to call back home and speak with my mom, basically. Back then you wrote letters and no emails or texts or FaceTime or any of that stuff. But so writing letters was the general way of communicating, and then every now and then you'd get a phone call home. So, I stayed busy while I was there, and so being young and away from home and in a foreign country in a hostile environment, you miss the home, especially during holidays and birthdays and celebrations and things that you've been used to and don't have them anymore. So you just deal with it the best you can.
What did you think about your officers that were there and your fellow soldiers?
When I first got to Vietnam, we had a whole company there, and we had a couple lieutenants and a major in charge. And but as part of the Paris Peace Accord that we signed, we had to get all the active duty military out of the country. So by July of '74, all the officers were gone, and we just had an NCOIC, which is a non-commissioned officer, in charge. And that was Master Sergeant John Valdez, who ended up being the last Marine to step off the rooftop on the last chopper during the evacuation. And I was on the chopper right before him, on the second to last. So I was the type that I was more of a loner than I was hanging out with a lot of guys, but you make friends, and when you're out in town, you need to be better always to go with somebody instead of going on your own. There were dangerous areas in the city of Saigon, and shouldn't go there alone, and should always travel in pairs, and that's good advice. And I made friends there that would end up being lifelong friends, and we're still in contact even 40 years later.
What was the feelings of the civilian people over in Vietnam towards the U.S. Marines?
The time I was there, there were a lot, and there still are people that panhandle or beg, and when you first get there, it pulls on your heartstrings, and but the longer you're there, you become hardened to it. And I remember some guys were mean to them, but they saw Americans as people with money, and there were a lot of females that married Marines and came back to the States, and there were, during the evacuation, we got tens of thousands of people out, Vietnamese, who now live in the country and have done very well. They prospered, hardworking, industrious people, and the largest population is in Orange County, California, and the second population largest is in Houston. So they've done very well, and they've assimilated, to the American culture and way of life.
So can you give me like a rundown of like what your day consisted of? Just like a normal day while you were deployed in Vietnam?
Yeah, because I was an embassy guard, our job was to guard the embassy and other American buildings. So, if you had to go duty, had to be there by 7. So you'd wake up 5:30, and get something to eat, get dressed, and they'd take you to wherever your post was, and you'd spend the day checking people's IDs and basically helping people coming into the embassy, meeting with American personnel. So spend the whole day basically as a security officer, and then once you got off duty, you could go to the Marine House. We had a restaurant right there in the Marine House, or you could go out into town. And I became involved. I played on the Marine Corps softball team and played on the Marine Corps basketball team. So I studied Taekwondo at the actual Marine House we lived at. So, after duty, you could have a relative semblance of a normal life. It wasn't like, during the war when they'd go out into the bush for 3-4 days or 3-4 weeks and just stay out there. And so it's more like almost like a peacetime way of life. Go to your job, do your job, get off work, and then explore activities. You could. We traveled sometimes. We went down to a beach resort called Vung Tau. We went as a group, and so it was exploring the city, and we didn't go out too far past the city on our own. They didn't want us to get too far away because there weren't very many of us, and there was still the war between the North and the South was still going on. So we needed to be cognizant of that and not get caught somewhere we shouldn't be.
How did that differ from where you were posted in Switzerland too?
Switzerland was, it was the strategic arm limitation talks in the mid-70s was between the Americans and Russians. We were trying to bring down the number of nuclear warheads between the two countries. So it was very important negotiations. So Geneva is the European headquarters for the United Nations. So there were a lot of diplomats from all over the world, and we would send from the United States groups of trade people, ambassadors for trade, and we'd send ambassadors and generals to Geneva to discuss the limitation talks on nuclear weapons. And so there were always dignitaries and high-profile people on the world level. They were always there in Geneva. So, but Geneva is a neutral country and a beautiful country, and you could be in the Alps in less than an hour from Geneva. In the summer, it'd be 80 degrees, and you could go an hour and be in snow. So. It was more of a relaxed atmosphere, and it wasn't so much spit and polish Marine Corps following all the precise details. So duty there was much better than Vietnam, and got to travel and went to France and the south of France down to Monte Carlo and Nice and Saint-Tropez, and went to Europe, or London, I should say, and met a lot of interesting people, and it was great duty, really good. I played rugby for 2 years, took up the sport, which we all played like American football players. We didn't know what we were doing, but we were athletic and young and strong. So rugby is a great sport, physically tough sport. no pads, and so I had a good time there. And I played basketball again, and so it was great time actually.
Do you think that your experiences overseas have changed your views on the military?
Yeah, I was on a real specific duty. You know, we had top secret clearances. Marine Security Guard School has the highest attrition rate of any school in the Marine Corps. So it's 35% of the people that go to the school fail, and now there are more difficult schools when you talking about the infantry and, you know, scout sniper or force reconnaissance. Those are like force reconnaissance is kind of like Navy SEALs, but as far as regular schools in the Marine Corps, it's has the toughest attrition rate, and all Marines know, Marine Security Guards or Marine Embassy Guards, same thing. It's an elite program, and not everybody can get in it, and the people that do get in it, 35% of them don't make it through the school. So I was fortunate. I was young, and I was still fairly squared away, and made it through with no problems. And it changed the way I looked at things, because it wasn't my idea of being a grunt, which is what I was. My MOS was 0351. Anything 03 means you're a grunt in the Marine Corps, which that's the backbone of the Marine Corps. That's the mission of the Marines. Is it says every Marine is a infantryman, but after you leave boot camp, then you've got truck drivers, and you got mechanics, and you've got cooks, and you've got all that. If your MOS is grunt 03, all you do is train for battle. And I actually have a 19-year-old son, my son Brett. He's an 0311, which is an infantryman, and that's all he does is train for battle.
Do you attend any like reunions?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was just in Vietnam 2 weeks ago with my daughter for the 40th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. It happened April 30th of 75, so 40 years later we were there, the exact date when the helicopters we were lifting off the rooftop, and we had a ceremony and put a plaque there for the last 2 Marines killed. The ambassador from Hanoi was there, and we had PBS and a reporter, which Mr. Rubin might remember. His name was Peter Arnett. He covered the Vietnam War and covered the war in I think the Persian Gulf. They were bombing Baghdad. So pretty good amount of publicity and press there. And we go to reunions every 5 years, and we watch. We go to Quantico, where the Marine Security Guard School is now, and we watch a class graduate and spit and polish, squared away, and they send them to places all over the world. So we keep in touch. We've got a really tight Fall of Saigon organization, because the last 2 Marines killed, we go back to their hometowns every year. One of the Marines, Charles McMahon, was from Woburn, Massachusetts, and he was a Boy of the Year in the Boys and Girls Club. So we go back every year and present 2 scholarships to a boy and a girl in his memory. And then the other Marine killed, Darwin Judge, his hometown's Marshalltown, Iowa, so we go back there every year, and he was an Eagle Scout, so we give 2 Eagle Scouts scholarships in his memory, so he's not forgotten.
So how do you think your experiences there have like changed your life, would you say?
Well, Vietnam was one of those things where Vietnam vets weren't treated very well when they came back, and the American people wanted to blame the combatants, the guys who were doing the fighting. They wanted to blame them for the war, and politicians were the ones that should have taken the blame. But So for 25 years, I really didn't talk about it. Didn't tell many people, hardly any, that I was a Vietnam veteran. And I've always had and I still do, that people say I'm too young to be a Vietnam veteran. Most Vietnam veterans are in their mid-60s or 70s or even older. So, and I'm not even 60 yet. But so the evacuation itself was very traumatic, and it left issues in my life that for years I tried to avoid and run from them and drink my way away from them. And so it affected me that way. But the military training, the Marine Corps discipline helped me to go to college. I didn't go to college till I was 27, but I was fortunate enough to get a degree, actually in education, became a teacher, and I became a builder. So overall experience, you experience difficult times, tough times, but you pull through it, and it helps throughout your life, the discipline you receive. Because if you go to college, there's no one going to be standing over you saying, okay, you've got to study, you've got to do this project, you got to do that. So you have to have it within you, and if you have that discipline that you've been trained, then it works for you. So it worked for me and helped me, and so I'm very grateful for my time. I'm proud to be a Marine Corps Vietnam veteran, and I love my country, so glad I could serve.
So I bet you're proud of your son.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I never talked to them much about, I never mentioned ever about them joining. And his senior year, Brett, I wrestled in high school. He told me, well, I'm going to go out for wrestling. I said, you're going to go out for wrestling? You need to go start when you're in like 7 or 8 years old. But anyway, so he went out his senior year and did a really good job. He broke his collarbone, like the first real practice, and you can't wrestle with a broken collarbone because a lot of upper body strength. And then he told me he was going to join the Marine Corps. And I said, well, don't do it because of me, do it because it's something you want to do. And he decided to do it, and then he wanted to go infantry, which is the toughest. And now he's might go to Scout Sniper School, which is one of the toughest schools in the Marine Corps, and it's get you battle ready. And so yeah, I'm proud of that, what he's chosen to do, and he's doing very well.
Is there anything you would like to say that we haven't covered in this interview?
I don't think so. I just, like I was saying, a lot of people, even to this day, there's a portion of Americans that didn't appreciate, which is an understatement, Vietnam veterans. They blamed them for war crimes and things. And if anybody was a war criminal, they were caught and convicted. And the rest of Vietnam veterans, did their job. They're American heroes, and they didn't ever get welcomed home. So every now and then you'll see people do a welcome home for Vietnam veterans, and it's a good thing, because the freedoms that we enjoy, people love all the freedoms we have. And now there's this horrible challenge on Facebook where people are like stomping on the American flag, and they do that over the blood of the veterans who have died for the freedoms that they're abusing. And it makes my heart sad to see people do that.
My father was in the service, and when he came back, I think it kind of got to him, and like you said, you had problems trying to maybe like drink your way out of it, and he was never really able to get the right help, and he passed away a few years ago. But what kind of helped you get over that and get on the right track?
Yeah, it's the internal help. I have faith. I'm a man of God, so that's helped me. But I didn't come to that conclusion for almost 20 years. So those 20 years there, you got to struggle and get through. But now, in 2010, I actually went to the VA, the Veterans Administration, for help. And they've done a pretty good job, and they have all kinds of programs depending on if you have post-traumatic stress or if you have physical, issues from your service. So there are more and more programs to help veterans, which is good. Abraham Lincoln, at Gettysburg, after the speech, he said that we need to take care of the widows and the men who bore the battle. So it's real important for the country to honor veterans, and because if it weren't for them, we wouldn't have this great country that we have and all the freedoms that we enjoy. So if people are in need, veterans are in need, trying to battle their demons, whatever they might be, they need to go to the VA, because there is help there, and they'll try to point you in the right direction or get you hooked up with counselors, for counseling or medical issues or job training, and so there's help available. You just got to get to it.
Right. Why do you think there's some people that would kind of would blame veterans for it? Because to me it just seems like kind of just, I can't understand it.
Yeah. I don't want to get too political, but I think there's a culture that Americans like war, and actually the warriors, or the people that are in the war, they're the ones that hate it the most. But it's, I hate to say a necessary evil, but I mean, in this world, the best way to have peace is through strength. If you're weak, it's like unfortunately, it's like society, bullies always pick on the weak people. Like you might even see it at school. So, no one's going to go pick on Raleigh Buckmaster because he's a big, strong kid. Well, that's the way I look at America. If we're strong, then, we won't get people trying to destroy us. But there are some people that, look at America as aggressors and imperialistic. But if you look at all the wars we've been in, we don't go to conquer, we don't go to enslave people, we don't go to take over their country and take their land. We go to try to help. And we've made mistakes, and maybe lots of them, but I don't think the intention of the American military, the American people, is to do others harm for no reason. We try to do good. Sometimes, unfortunately, there are casualties and secondary, unfortunately, people shouldn't get affected or get killed, and they do, and that's people, no one likes that. But so people get on a, use the president's word, get on a high horse and say that America is they're apologizing for the things we've done, and I think America has done more for the betterment of mankind than any country in the history of the world. And we don't have an agenda to conquer the world like a Hitler or some yahoos. So I guess it's, if you surround yourself with people that are very negative and say, we've done bad things, and we're war hawks, and we love war and battle and all that. I guess it just sinks into their heads, and they start believing it. But the freedoms that this country have, if you look at all the men and the women now that die for, in the Revolutionary War, War of 1812, Civil War, all the wars, they did it with the hope that we could make the country better and the world a better place. So that's where my thinking is.
My last point, do you kind of consider the U.S. kind of like the police of, trying to keep everything?
That's the way it's looked in the past, but we're moving away from that, because we can't take care of the whole world. And, our borders in the South now, they're pretty much open borders, which they shouldn't be, because they're just letting people come in, undocumented people, and don't know what type of people we're getting, and it's kind of scary. But some people think, we should save the whole world, but kind of tough to do. But there are billions of people that want to come to this country, and there are a lot of people that don't want to come. So the ones that want to come, that's fine, but just do it in a legal manner instead of illegally.
Well, that's all I got. But thank you very much for having this interview with me.
Yeah,
I
you're
really
welcome.
do appreciate it.
No problem.
Just want
Is that your ride out there?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Who is it?
My mom.
Was that Cindy?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen her in a while. Yeah, this flag, when I went back in November, I'm the last Marine to take down the flag in Vietnam. So when I was there in November, they actually put me in a 3-man detail and went out and pulled the flag down, and they gave me the flag that was flying over the consulate. I got to fold it up.
Wow.
I unfolded it. So it was